Okay, well, hi and welcome, folks. I hope everybody's safe and well. In this edition of Let's Talk Community Sport Hubs, we're going to be talking about change, focusing on a couple of specific community sport hubs that have opted to significantly change their approach to better achieve outcomes for their community. So we're going to call this session It's Okay to Change. To help me explore this topic and provide his experience is a hub officer friend of mine, who's also one of our Changing Lives champions. So I'm delighted to welcome Liam Baird to our virtual room. Welcome, Liam.
Hi, James. How you doing?
I'm okay. Thanks for joining us.
No
You know
problem.
the drill. I know you've watched a couple of these podcasts before. So we're going to ask you just to share your experiences, Liam, with your peers, so that we can collectively improve how we're supporting community sport hubs all across Scotland. So most of the guys will know you, but you're one of 6 community sport hub officers in Glasgow, employed by Glasgow Sport and working with community sport hubs in the east of the city.
Yep.
You've not been furloughed through these crazy pandemic times, so I'm looking forward to learning what's been going on in your community sport hubs, and also how the Changing Lives approach and your experiences through that is helping you in your role.
Yep.
So I guess when I knew we were going to have this conversation, I kind of was thinking back to when we first met, and I think it was when you became a colleague of mine at Sports Scotland, when you took on the role as a sports development intern. I was trying to remember what year that was, but I was struggling. So
Yeah. Oh, that must have been 2015, 2016.
there you go. So you'll be a few years into your community sport hub role now.
Yeah. Yeah. About 4 years.
4 years in that post. So I mean, I was keen. The first question, just to kind of get things, get the ball rolling, was just how your experience at Sports Scotland kind of is helping you in your current role.
Yeah, it was useful. Seeing it from a national perspective was really good to get that insight, particularly speaking to other league managers, partnership managers, some other authorities. That gave me a really good overview and rounding of what the hub programme is, how it differs in different authorities, how there's challenges in rural, but there's challenges in urban settings. So,
Yep.
it really gave me a good overview of how it's all different and how it can all work together.
Cool. Well, it's been great to see you develop. I'm really looking forward to drawing out some of the work you've been doing in the East End of Glasgow. I'm going to start by just taking us right back to the principles of community sport hubs, and we've been using these principles to guide the development of the project for over 10 years now. And I know you've got experience of a couple of community sport hubs that have made significant changes in order to better support these principles.
Yep.
So again, as I said, I'm keen to learn a bit about that and see what other officers can learn from it. So I'll jump right in, and I want to start by asking you about failure. I talk a lot to the Community Sport Hub Officer Network and throw out lines like failing forward, it's okay to make mistakes, you've got to mess things up if you're wanting to learn anything. They're kind of throwaways, but we're trying to make them part of the ethos of the project. I'm keen just to know how easy it is as a hub officer to live out that type of narrative with your community sport hubs.
Yeah, no, definitely. It can be quite easy to fail, but there's obviously a lot of movement that you can bring it back around. So you're in a hub, the environment's different and it can change rapidly. There's a whole host of areas that could cause this. It's people, it's funding, it's events, it's planning and weather. Also, communities change as well. Who's leading the hub, who they connecting with, community councils. But I think most importantly is try to influence a group of people, local people, is the most challenging part, and that is often where a lot of people can fail. Particularly passions are high, I guess, is probably one of the sort of more obvious ones. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But simple things may prevent it from happening, or a program or event that you're running. So it's just starting from where the hub's point of view is, getting that solid grounding, taking it from there, and that will obviously hopefully put you in a stead that sets you up not to fail because you're really embedded in that organisation and understand that wider community. And it's also taking simple things into account. If you're going to run something, what's on that community that day? Is there a football match on TV? That might prevent an event or a programme getting started really well. It might take a couple of weeks to build up. So there's lots of things that you should think about that's outside the box, to help you overcome that fear of potentially failing. But it can be quite easy to fail, but you can gather it back up again and crack on.
Yep. mean, I'm already getting a sense there just from some of your experiences, you know, about the relationships you have in your hubs, and you know how you tailor your approach, given the scenario. So I'm keen to get under the bonnet of that. You know, and for me, you know, as you've said, their failure doesn't really mean you've given up. It just means that you accept change. And you know, with a progressive project like hubs, we've got to fail because we want to change and improve. So I know the Bailison community sport hubs made a significant change. So could you tell me just a little bit about what it is specifically they've changed, Liam?
Yeah, sure. So Bailson Hub is an area-based hub. They take in around about 3 to 4 communities. Fundamentally, the only real change is their name, and it still has the same people involved, but how they want to be perceived locally is the biggest change. So they've gone through during lockdown this exercise to basically rebrand themselves to be more reflective of their community.
So, you know, give me a bit more specifics then. I actually do know a wee bit about Bailison, and we were talking about it before we came on camera there, that you actually live not far from that community yourself, and it's a community I know well because my dad grew up there. But tell us a little bit about the specifics of the Bailison community and what the exact changes are to that name and the kind of thinking.
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, the name Bailson Community Sport Hub was named after the political ward at one point. So that at that time the name made sense. As I said, 3 or 4 communities it covers, and as part of the East End. And at one point, that's where most of the clubs were based, was in Baillieston, using a couple of facilities in that area, a couple of venues. But over time, clubs move around. Specifically, the last 2 to 2.5 years, most clubs now use Mount Vernon and Brackney, and only one's really still in Baillieston. Even though all these communities really essentially run into each other. But from this, the hub really struggled with a buy-in from the local community. So, for example, some community councils wouldn't buy in because of the name Baillieston. They seen that as not their territory.
Yep.
And it's a bit of a struggle to really engage them. Probably it didn't really suit their agenda, if you want to think about it that way, because of the name. So essentially, the hub felt that that was limiting their ambitions, basically, and they didn't equally represent the area or the community that it serves, mainly because over the last 2.5 years, people have moved around. Whilst they want to be representative of their community, and they still want to be inclusive for this part of the East End. So, as I said, most clubs move around, they're now mainly in Mount Vernon and Brackney, but they didn't want to shut out anybody from Baillieston who might still want to join.
Yep.
So they felt that they couldn't rename to, say, Mount Vernon Community Sport Hub, because that would be exclusive. So they've rebranded their name to keep it generic to Active Glasgow East, mainly due to their geographic location in the city, and it also doesn't really affect any other hubs in the East End as well.
Yeah. So I guess I'm building a picture as we're talking here. It's an urban environment. There's lots of kind of communities, quite defined communities, very close together, meshing into one another. Within that geography, then you've got clubs, you know, transitioning into different parts of those locations. And I guess what I'm hearing is you understanding that, you know, for the hub and the clubs in the hub to be able to connect to that wider community, they needed to you know, change a historical reference, which was Baillieston, to something that was a little bit more engaging.
Yeah.
So I'm keen to know a little bit about what they kind of needed from you in this whole process. I mean, I've got a sense now that they're kind of reflecting, going, you know, this Baillieston title isn't quite us. We know what we want to change to. What have they needed from you? How have you needed to help them?
Yes, so the committee as a whole are pretty strong, and we have a good mixture of clubs and local people, local organisations. So for me, really all they needed was a simple and quick community mapping exercise.
Okay.
So basically what that included was plotted out where all the hubs are in the east end of the city, approximate distances so we couldn't really run into them. So in a sense, they're redefining their boundaries almost to kind of keep it, you know, really specific to what they want to do. Also mapped out area partners, the benefits that they could bring, the ones where they work with, where that could be improved, other ones we're not tapped into yet. And basically we try to tie it all as well to our local strategy, which is changing lives for active communities.
Yep.
And in a way, this is really where the word active in our name comes from. Hub slowly doesn't really deliver traditional team sports that do. For example, just before COVID, we were on the brink of launching easy exercise program, which was indoor curling, indoor bowls, country athletics, and so on. So for me, they really just wanted to tile this up together, what they've already been doing, what they're looking to do, how it fits locally, how it fits nationally, and how we can really tie up the community together, essentially. So, as I say, there's a lot of moving parts in this hub with our community organisation involved. They've got a huge reach, huge engagement. It's really just building on that. So, more than anything, it was just more of a nudge towards this sort of rebrand and ensuring that they're comfortable with it and they'll be flying once everything's kind of completed. And it'll obviously improve how they are perceived in the local area.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I'm keen to come back to that kind of what broader active kind of banner in a second. It's pretty clear there that you've been able to add a bit of value by bringing in that simple kind of visual mapping exercise, probably an exercise that they've not thought about doing before, but actually just helps them understand where they want to focus, and the bit I'll come to in a wee sec is what organisations they're maybe not connected to that the mapping exercise kind of led them towards. So you've said there, Baillieston now active Glasgow East. Have I got that right? Yeah, as a kind of area-based hub. I know you've got another kind of example of a school-based hub making a fairly significant change in East Bank as well. Would you tell us a wee bit about that one?
Yeah, sure. So East Bank, again, is based in the east end of the city, not too far from active Glasgow East, approximately 2 miles really from the outside of it to the hub. Anyway, so the challenge they've had in East Bank is it's often mistaken for school-led as an education-led activity, because the school's also called East Bank. Again, this is historic, but as you can imagine, this has created a whole host of barriers and struggles for that hub in the wider community. So similarly, to active Glasgow East Bank are doing a rebranding exercise as well. They want to be really representative of their community, which is a fairly deprived community. So they've decided to rebrand to Shettleston Community Sport Hub and are opting for more of an area-based hub. They're trying to expand their offer, they're using more venues in the local area. So they're really trying to reduce barriers and open up future opportunities, much the same as active Glasgow East, but a slightly different model and a slightly different part of the city, even though they're really close. It just shows you how different these communities can actually be.
Yeah. And what types of things have you been doing with the guys at Shettleston then, in terms of kind of, you talked about the kind of mapping tool with active Glasgow East. What kind of practical tools have you been using with the Shettleston guys to get them thinking about what they could be doing?
So during the first lockdown, I want to say it was around about April into May time, we were having a discussion at our meeting how we can really improve this hub, and the simple answer was recruitment. I know it sounds a bit bizarre at this time of the year, particularly during a pandemic, to try and recruit volunteers, but they did. So in this hub, there are a few clubs that are quite big, really busy. People were putting a hand up at voluntary times to say, you know what, struggling a little bit here. So this was an exercise to really support them, basically. So the hub, during a global pandemic, was able to recruit a chair, a secretary, and a projects officer. And basically, these three roles were a catalyst for change. They began doing all the sort of nitty-gritty stuff that some volunteers were struggling with for homeschooling. They were maybe furloughed, they were working, a whole host of things here. So these three volunteers really took on our workload, and we used the Changing Lives tool, signposting. So basically, again, it's similar to a community map. And that's how we were trying to really engage other clubs and organisations that previously would say that was a school education-led activity, couldn't really buy into the programme, but now we've got a wider understanding of what a hub is. So we're trying to really do that and basically, consult the community as well, building that offer we've got, and then particularly with COVID in the way, what needs to change, what safety measures might need to be considered for any restart. So they've taken on quite a wide role, these 3 volunteers, to support the hub.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of kind of key things there for me. I'll come back to the the capability during COVID in a second. But you've clearly got I guess a couple of hubs there that have reflected on how they were historically set up and realised it's not giving them the freedom to go out and fully connect to the wider community. How are you going to know that those changes were the right things to do? Are you already seeing evidence of that? You've obviously talked a bit about the wider partnerships with Active Glasgow East, and that piece there around new volunteers, new thinking, new connections with Shettleston. How will you know that those changes have been the right thing to do?
So for Active Glasgow East, previously they really struggled with some engagement for simple things like building up other programs. We would work really hard with active schools, but sometimes it would just fall down at the last minute with people in the communities. As I was saying earlier, communities change, things change. But with Active Glasgow East, they've started to run, or they've finished actually last week, a logo competition area. If we ran this under Baillieston Community Sport Hub, it might have not got good traction. We've seen a good traction from this one, and it's simply because the name's changed. We're looking to do other things. It's people that's new, and there's maybe a wider understanding. Maybe Community Sport Hub, the name Baillieston Community Sport Hub was an off-put for them. But changing it to Active Glasgow East maybe rang a bell in this part of the east end of the city. So we've really seen it start to see some traction from that. So straight away, that's good engagement that we previously didn't have.
Yeah.
From point of view, they've got consultation out at the minute, how they can improve offer, how they can make it safe, recruit more volunteers. The simple 10 question survey, it's been out 12 days now, and there's about 50 or 60 so far responses. Again, previously as East Bank Community Sport Hub may have struggled with this because the whole school attachment and potential barriers there. So small things are happening in a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. I mean, I think the thing that strikes me with all these kind of conversations with hub officers is it's just really simple things you've done. You've used a couple of quite simple tools, very engaging tools to get people reflecting. But in this instance, you've supported them to make what is a significant change, and it's just starting to give them a bit of that freedom. So the message for me for other guys, for other hub officers listening to this call is that, as I said at the title of the podcast, it's okay to change, and sometimes you have to change to create a little bit of freedom. And I think your examples of those 2 examples of that, Liam, are brilliant. So you've clearly got community leaders there that are up for embracing change, and I'm not naive enough to say that that's not necessarily the picture across every hub. I know there'll be hub officers listening to this that have got their challenges, but what would your advice be to those hub officers, if they sense that opportunity to change? It might seem quite daunting or quite scary. You're coming in, what you say, you've been 4 years in the hub post. That Baillieston hub would have been there before you came into town, and you're trying to encourage them to do something quite fundamental and quite significant. What would your advice be to your peers if they sense an opportunity like that?
Yeah, essentially go for it. Basically, working with volunteers, you're trying to help voluntary organisations develop. They've got the community at their heart as well, so they obviously want to look out for their community and how they can engage them further, how they can make it more active and so on. But what I would say is, I suppose these 2 hubs are quite unique in a sense that they've both got organisations in it that are not traditionally sport and physical activity. So basically, that's been such a good driver for the hub. They can come in from a community's point of view. They can take on that work of engaging the community. They might have relations with community councils, other community organisations that can support. So they've really bridged that gap between sport, physical activity, and the community. Yeah. So a lot of time, as maybe since 3 years ago or so, really taking that approach to embed community organisations into a hub. And the benefits that's brought has been amazing. Even just simply talking to people and unlocking barriers has been really beneficial, particularly in active Glasgow East's point of view, and Shettleson's coming up behind them now. So yeah, spend time just digging around the community, looking for these leaders and these organisations to really help the hub. And you can just simply put out pros and cons to what change might bring, and it's not taken away from the sport or activity. It's just how they're perceived in the local area.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to take that as a quote. Spend time digging around those local organisations. I know you've been part of the champions journey, and some of the kind of training skills that's given you has been encouraging you to go and look in your community for other organisations that not necessarily have an interest in sport, but share an interest in supporting and developing people. And it sounds like in those two examples, Active Glasgow East and Shettleston, you've got those leaders in place. So for all the other guys out there, go and root around and see if you can find who those leaders are. I know Liam will be happy to answer any calls or emails looking for advice on how to hook them once you've got them. But no, I think I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts there, Liam. It's if we think about where we're at with the pandemic, and the sport's effectively in shutdown now in February, the most active we can be is walking, cycling, jogging. That I think what we realise is that will hook a lot more people than tennis, basketball, and golf. And hubs do really need to think about the breadth of their offer, and the fact that basketball, tennis, and golf might scare off some organisations, but walking, cycling, and jogging might not scare off others. So we're heading into some really exciting times. Sport can bring people back together, so hubs need to be at the forefront of that. We've got a responsibility to be supportive, knowledgeable and positive about what hubs can do in communities. I think your experiences today, Liam, have demonstrated that. So I encourage everybody on the call just to reflect on what Liam shared with you today, and think about it, what it means in your own kind of version of the world, and reflect on that and see if you can take something from it to make some change, because change is good. All right. Big thanks to you, Liam. And take care, folks. I look forward to seeing you in a future edition of the Let's Talk Community Sport Hub podcast. Take care.